Glacier National Park is a national park located in the U.S. state of Montana on the Canada-United States border with the Canadian provinces of Alberta and British Columbia. The park encompasses over 1 million acres and includes parts of 2 mountain ranges, over 130 named lakes, more than 1,000 different species of plants, and hundreds of species of animals. This vast, pristine ecosystem is the centerpiece of what has been referred to as the crown of the continent ecosystem, a region of protected land encompassing 16,000 square miles. The region that became Glacier National Park was first inhabited by Native Americans. Upon the arrival of European explorers, it was dominated by the Blackfoot in the east and the Flathead in the western regions. Under pressure, the Blackfoot ceded the mountainous parts of the treaty lands in 1895 to the federal government. It later became part of the park. Soon after the establishment of the park on May 11, 1910, a number of hotels and chalets were constructed by the Great Northern Railway. These historic hotels and chalets are listed as National Historic Landmarks, and a total of 350 locations are on the National Register of Historic Places. By 1932, work was completed on the Going to the Sun Road, later designated a National Historic Civil Engineering Landmark, which provided greater accessibility for automobiles into the heart of the park. The mountains of Glacier National Park began forming 170 million years ago when ancient rocks were forced eastward up and over much younger rock strata, known as the Lewis Overthrust. These sedimentary rocks are considered to have some of the finest fossilized examples of extremely early life found anywhere on Earth. The current shapes of the Lewis and Livingston mountain ranges and positioning and size of the lakes show the telltale evidence of massive glacial action, which carved U-shaped valleys and left behind moraines which impounded water, creating lakes. Of the estimated 150 glaciers which existed in the park in the mid-19th century, only 25 active glaciers remained by 2010. Scientists studying the glaciers in the park have estimated that all the glaciers may disappear by 2030, if the current climate patterns persist. Glacier National Park has almost all its original native plant and animal species. Large mammals such as the grizzly bears, moose, and mountain goats, as well as rare or endangered species like the wolverines and Canadian lynxes, inhabit this park. Hundreds of species of birds, more than a dozen fish species, and a few reptile and amphibian species have been documented. The park has numerous ecosystems ranging from prairie to tundra. Notably, the easternmost forests of western red cedar and hemlock grow in the southwest portion of the park. Large forest fires are uncommon in the park. However, in 2003 over 13% of the park burned. Glacier National Park borders Waterton Lakes National Park in Canada. The two parks are known as the Waterton Glacier International Peace Park and were designated as the world's first international peace park in 1932. Both parks were designated by the United Nations as biosphere reserves in 1976, and in 1995 as World Heritage Sites. History. According to archaeological evidence, Native Americans first arrived in the glacier area some 10,000 years ago. The earliest occupants with lineage to current tribes were the Flathead and Kootenai, Shoshone, and Cheyenne. The Blackfeet arrived around the beginning of the 18th century and soon dominated the eastern slopes of what later became the park, as well as the Great Plains immediately to the east. The park region provided the Blackfeet shelter from the harsh winter winds of the plains, allowing them to supplement the traditional bison hunts with other game meat. Today, the Blackfeet Indian Reservation borders the park in the east, while the Flathead Indian Reservation is located west and south of the park. When the Blackfeet Reservation was first established in 1855 by the Lame Bull Treaty, it included the eastern area of the current park up to the Continental Divide. To the Blackfeet, the mountains of this area, especially Chief Mountain and the region in the southeast at Two Medicine, were considered the backbone of the world, and were frequented during vision quests. In 1895, Chief White Calf of the Blackfeet authorized the sale of the mountain area, some 800,000 acres, to the U.S. government for $1.5 million, with the understanding that they would maintain usage rights to the land for hunting as long as the ceded stripe will be public land of the United States. This established the current boundary between the park and the reservation. While exploring the Meares River in 1806, the Lewis and Clark expedition came within 50 miles of the area that is now the park. A series of explorations after 1850 helped to shape the understanding of the area that later became the park. In 1885, George Bird Grinnell hired noted explorer James Willard Schultz to guide him on a hunting expedition into what would later become the park. After several more trips to the region, Grinnell became so inspired by the scenery that he spent the next 2 decades working to establish a national park. In 1901, Grinnell wrote a description of the region in which he referred to it as the crown of the continent. His efforts to protect the land make him the premier contributor to this cause. A few years after Grinnell first visited, Henry L. Stimson and 2 companions, including a Blackfoot, climbed the steep east face of Chief Mountain in 1892. In 1891, the Great Northern Railway crossed the Continental Divide at Maria's Pass, 5,213 feet, which is along the southern boundary of the park. In an effort to stimulate use of the railroad, the Great Northern soon advertised the splendors of the region to the public. The company lobbied the United States Congress. In 1897, the park was designated as a forest preserve. Under the forest designation, mining was still allowed but was not commercially successful. Meanwhile, proponents of protecting the region kept up their efforts. In 1910, under the influence of the Boone and Crockett Club, spearheaded by club members George Bird Grinnell, Henry L. Stimson, and the railroad, a bill was introduced into the U.S. Congress which redesignated the region from a forest reserve to a national park. This bill was signed into law by President William Howard Taft on May 11, 1910. In 1910, George Bird Grinnell wrote, "This park, the country owes to the Boone and Crockett Club, whose members discovered the region, suggested it being set aside, caused the bill to be introduced into Congress and awakened interest in it all over the country." From May until August 1910, the Forest Reserve Supervisor, Fremont Nathan Haynes, managed the park's resources as the first acting superintendent. In August 1910, William Logan was appointed the park's first superintendent, while the designation of the Forest Reserve confirmed the traditional usage rights of the Blackfeet. The enabling legislation of the national park does not mention the guarantees to the Native Americans. It is the position of the United States government that with the special designation as a national park, the mountains ceded the multi-purpose public land status and the former rights ceased to exist as it was confirmed by the Court of Claims in 1935. Some Blackfeet held that their traditional usage rights still exist de jure. In the 1890s, armed standoffs were avoided narrowly several times. The Great Northern Railway, under the supervision of President Lewis W. Hill built a number of hotels and chalets throughout the park in the 1910s to promote tourism. These buildings, constructed and operated by a Great Northern subsidiary called the Glacier Park Company, were modeled on Swiss architecture as part of Hill's plan to portray Glacier as America's Switzerland. Hill was especially interested in sponsoring artists to come to the park, building tourist lodges that displayed the work. His hotels in the park never made a profit, but they attracted thousands of visitors who came via the Great Northern. Vacationers commonly took pack trips on horseback between the lodges or utilized the seasonal stagecoach routes to gain access to the many glacier area in the northeast. The chalets built between 1910 and 1913 included Belton Street, Mary, Going to the Sun, Many Glacier, 2 Medicine, Sperry, Granite Park, Cut Bank, and Gunsight Lake. The railway also built Glacier Park Lodge, adjacent to the park on its east side, and the Many Glacier Hotel on the east shore of Swift Current Lake. Louis Hill personally selected the sites for all of these buildings, choosing each for the dramatic scenic backdrops and views. Another developer, John Lewis, built the Lewis Glacier Hotel on Lake McDonald in 1913-1914. The Great Northern Railway bought the hotel in 1930 and it was later renamed Lake McDonald Lodge. Some of the chalets were in remote backcountry locations accessible only by trail. Today, only Sperry, Granite Park, and Belton chalets are still in operation, while a building formerly belonging to 2 Medicine Chalet is now 2 Medicine Store. The surviving chalet and hotel buildings within the park are now designated as National Historic Landmarks. In total, 350 buildings and structures within the park are listed on the National Register of Historic Places, including ranger stations, backcountry patrol cabins, fire lookouts, and concession facilities. After the park was well established and visitors began to rely more on automobiles, work was begun on the 53-mile-long Going to the Sun Road, completed in 1932. Also known simply as the Sun Road, the road bisects the park and is the only route that ventures deep into the park, going over the Continental Divide at Logan Pass, 6,646 feet at the midway point. The Sun Road is also listed on the National Register of Historic Places and in 1985 was designated a National Historic Civil Engineering Landmark. Another route along the southern boundary between the park and national forests is U.S. Route 2, which crosses the Continental Divide at Marias Pass and connects the towns of West Glacier and East Glacier. The Civilian Conservation Corps, a New Deal relief agency for young men, played a major role between 1933 and 1942 in developing both Glacier National Park and Yellowstone National Park. CCC projects included reforestation, campground development, trail construction, fire hazard reduction, and firefighting work. The increase in motor vehicle traffic through the park during the 1930s resulted in the construction of new concession facilities at Swift Current and Rising Sun, both designed for automobile-based tourism. These early auto camps are now also listed on the National Register. In 2011, Glacier National Park was depicted on the 7th quarter in the America the Beautiful Quarter series. Park management. Glacier National Park is managed by the National Park Service, with the park's headquarters in West Glacier, Montana. Visitation to Glacier National Park averages slightly less than 2 million visitors annually. However, a relative few venture far from main roadways and hotels. Glacier National Park had an operating budget of $13,190,000 for the 2009 2008 fiscal year. The 2008 budget increased from 2007 and was used to increase employee staffing levels, but monies for maintenance projects and road work were not forthcoming. In anticipation of the 100th anniversary of the park in 2010, major reconstruction of the Going to the Sun Road was completed, creating temporary road closures. The Federal Highway Administration managed the reconstruction project in cooperation with the National Park Service. Some rehabilitation of major structures such as visitor centers and historic hotels, as well as improvements in wastewater treatment facilities and campgrounds, are expected to be completed by the anniversary date. Also planned are fishery studies for Lake McDonald, updates of the historical archives, and restoration of trails. The mandate of the National Park Service is to preserve and protect natural and cultural resources. The Organic Act of August 25, 1916 established the National Park Service as a federal agency. One major section of the Act has often been summarized as the mission to promote and regulate the use of the national parks, which purpose is to conserve the scenery and the natural and historic objects and the wildlife therein, and to provide for the enjoyment of the same in such manner and by such means as will leave them unimpaired for the enjoyment of future generations. Quote, in keeping with this mandate, hunting is illegal in the park, as are mining, logging, and the removal of natural or cultural resources. Additionally, oil and gas exploration and extraction are not permitted. These restrictions, however, caused a lot of conflict with the adjoining Blackfeet Indian Reservation. When they sold the land to the United States government, it was with the stipulation of being able to maintain the usage rights of the area, many of which had come into conflict with these regulations. In 1974, a wilderness study was submitted to Congress which identified 95% of the area of the park as qualifying for wilderness designation. Unlike a few other parks, Glacier National Park has yet to be protected as wilderness, but National Park Service policy requires that identified areas listed in the report be managed as wilderness until Congress renders a full decision. 93% of Glacier National Park is managed as wilderness, even though it has not been officially designated. Geography and geology. The park is bordered on the north by Waterton Lakes National Park in Alberta, and the Flathead Provincial Forest and Akaminakishinana Provincial Park in British Columbia. To the west, the North Fork of the Flathead River forms the western boundary, while its middle fork is part of the southern boundary. The Blackfeet Indian Reservation provides most of the eastern boundary. The Lewis and Clark and the Flathead National Forests form the southern and western boundary. The remote Bob Marshall Wilderness Complex is located in the two forests immediately to the south. The park contains a dozen large lakes and 700 smaller ones, but only 131 lakes have been named. Lake McDonald on the western side of the park is the longest at 9.4 miles, the largest in area at 6,823 acres, and the deepest at 464 feet. Numerous smaller lakes, known as tarns, are located in cirques formed by glacial erosion. Some of these lakes, like Avalanche Lake and Cracker Lake, are colored an opaque turquoise by suspended glacial silt, which also causes a number of streams to run milky white. The lakes of Glacier National Park remain cold year-round, with temperatures rarely above 50 degrees Fahrenheit at the surface. Cold water lakes such as these support little plankton growth, ensuring that the lake waters are remarkably clear. The lack of plankton, however, lowers the rate of pollution filtration, so pollutants have a tendency to linger longer. Consequently, the lakes are considered environmental bellwethers as they can be quickly affected by even minor increases in pollutants. 200 waterfalls are scattered throughout the park. However, during drier times of the year, many of these are reduced to a trickle. The largest falls include those in the Two Medicine region, McDonald Falls in the McDonald Valley, and Swift Current Falls in the Many Glacier area, which is easily observable and close to the Many Glacier Hotel. One of the tallest waterfalls is Bird Woman Falls, which drops 492 feet from a hanging valley beneath the north slope of Mount Obolin. Geology: the rocks found in the park are primarily sedimentary rocks of the belt supergroup. They were deposited in shallow seas over 1.6 billion to 800 million years ago. During the formation of the Rocky Mountains, 170 million years ago, one region of rocks now known as the Lewis Overthrust was forced eastward 50 miles. This overthrust was several miles thick and hundreds of miles long. This resulted in older rocks being displaced over newer ones, so the overlying Proterozoic rocks are between 1.4 and 1.5 billion years older than Cretaceous age rocks they now rest on. One of the most dramatic evidences of this overthrust is visible in the form of Chief Mountain, an isolated peak on the edge of the eastern boundary of the park rising 2,500 feet above the Great Plains. There are 6 mountains in the park over 10,000 feet in elevation, with Mount Cleveland at 10,466 feet being the tallest. Appropriately named Triple Divide Peak sends waters towards the Pacific Ocean, Hudson Bay, and Gulf of Mexico watersheds. This peak can effectively be considered to be the apex of the North American continent, although the mountain is only 8,020 feet above sea level. The rocks in Glacier National Park are the best preserved Proterozoic sedimentary rocks in the world, with some of the world's most fruitful sources for records of early life. Sedimentary rocks of similar age located in other regions have been greatly altered by mountain building and other metamorphic changes. Consequently, fossils are less common and more difficult to observe. The rocks in the park preserve such features as millimeter-scale lamination, ripple marks, mud cracks, salt crystal casts, raindrop impressions, oolites, and other sedimentary bedding characteristics. 6 fossilized species of stromatolites, early organisms consisting of primarily blue-green algae, have been documented and dated at about 1 billion years. The discovery of the Apecuni Formation, a well-preserved rock stratum in the park, pushed back the established date for the origination of animal life a full billion years. This rock formation has bedding structures which are believed to be the remains of the earliest identified Metazoan life on Earth. Glacier National Park is dominated by mountains which were carved into the present shapes by the huge glaciers of the last ice age. These glaciers have largely disappeared over the last 12,000 years. Evidence of widespread glacial action is found throughout the park in the form of U-shaped valleys, glacial cirques, arêtes, and large outflow lakes radiating like fingers from the base of the highest peaks. Since the end of the ice ages, various warming and cooling trends have occurred. The last recent cooling trend was during the Little Ice Age, which took place approximately between 1550 and 1850. During the Little Ice Age, the glaciers in the park expanded and advanced, although to nowhere near as great an extent as they had during the Ice Age. During the middle of the 20th century, examination of the maps and photographs from the previous century provided clear evidence that the 150 glaciers known to have existed in the park 100 years earlier had greatly retreated, and in many cases disappeared altogether. Repeat photography of the glaciers, such as the pictures taken of Grinnell Glacier between 1938 and 2009 as shown, helped to provide visual confirmation of the extent of glacier retreat. In the 1980s, the U.S. Geological Survey began a more systematic study of the remaining glaciers, which has continued to the present day. By 2010, 37 glaciers remained, but only 25 of these were considered to be active glaciers of at least 25 acres in area. If the current warming trend continues, all of the remaining glaciers in the park will be gone by 2030. This glacier retreat follows a worldwide pattern that has accelerated even more since 1980. Without a major climatic change in which cooler and moister weather returns and persists, the mass balance, which is the accumulation rate versus the ablation rate of glaciers, will continue to be negative, and the glaciers have been projected to eventually disappear, leaving behind only barren rock. After the end of the Little Ice Age in 1850, the glaciers in the park retreated moderately until the 1910s. Between 1917 and 1941, the retreat rate accelerated and was as high as 330 feet per year for some glaciers. A slight cooling trend from the 1940s until 1979 helped to slow the rate of retreat and, in a few cases, even advance the glaciers over 10 meters. However, during the 1980s, the glaciers in the park began a steady period of loss of glacial ice, which continues as of 2010. In 1850, the glaciers in the region near Blackfoot and Jackson glaciers covered 5,337 acres, but by 1979, the same region of the park had glacier ice covering only 1,828 acres. Between 1850 and 1979, 73% of the glacial ice had melted away. At the time the park was created, Jackson Glacier was part of Blackfoot Glacier, but the two have separated into two glaciers since. The impact of glacier retreat on the park's ecosystems is not fully known, but plant and animal species that are dependent on cold water could suffer due to a loss of habitat. Reduced seasonal melting of glacial ice may also affect stream flow during the dry summer and fall seasons, reducing water table levels and increasing the risk of forest fires. The loss of glaciers will also reduce the aesthetic visual appeal that glaciers provide to visitors. Climate: as the park spans the Continental Divide and has more than 7,000 feet in elevation variance, many climates and microclimates are found in the park. As with other alpine systems, average temperature usually drops as elevation increases. The western side of the park, in the Pacific watershed, has a milder and wetter climate due to its lower elevation. Precipitation is greatest during the winter and spring, averaging 2 to 3 inches per month. Snowfall can occur at any time of the year, even in the summer, and especially at higher altitudes. The wind can bring prolonged cold waves, especially on the eastern side of the Continental Divide, which has a higher elevation overall. Snowfalls are significant over the course of the winter, with the largest accumulation occurring in the west. During the tourist season, daytime high temperatures average 60 to 70 degrees Fahrenheit, and nighttime lows usually drop into the 40 degrees Fahrenheit range. Temperatures in the high country may be much cooler. In the lower western valleys, daytime highs in the summer may reach 90 degrees Fahrenheit. Rapid temperature changes have been noted in the region. In Browning, Montana, just east of the park in the Blackfoot Reservation, a world record temperature drop of 100 degrees Fahrenheit in only 24 hours occurred on the night of January 23–24, 1916, when thermometers plunged from 44 to -56 degrees Fahrenheit. Glacier National Park has a highly regarded global climate change research program, based in West Glacier, with the main headquarters in Bozeman, Montana. The U.S. Geological Survey has performed scientific research on specific climate change studies since 1992. In addition to the study of the retreating glaciers, research performed includes forest modeling studies in which fire ecology and habitat alterations are analyzed. Additionally, changes in alpine vegetation patterns are documented. Watershed studies in which stream flow rates and temperatures are recorded frequently at fixed gauging stations, and atmospheric research in which UVB radiation, ozone and other atmospheric gases are analyzed over time. The research compiled contributes to a broader understanding of climate changes in the park. The data collected, when compared to other facilities scattered around the world, help to correlate these climatic changes on a global scale. Glacier is considered to have excellent air and water quality. No major areas of dense human population exist anywhere near the region, and industrial effects are minimized due to a scarcity of factories and other potential contributors of pollutants. However, the sterile and cold lakes found throughout the park are easily contaminated by airborne pollutants that fall whenever it rains or snows, and some evidence of these pollutants has been found in park waters. Wildfires could also impact the quality of water. However, the pollution level is currently viewed as negligible, and the park lakes and waterways have a water quality rating of A1, the highest rating given by the state of Montana.